Hi everyone. So I am switching the live stream to tomorrow night because I want to watch the Republican National Convention, and mostly I just want to see Trump and hear what he has to say in light of the events that took place over the weekend. But I'm also working on Revelation 14, and I'm going to take the opportunity to do a separate video that I was going to address in my live stream, which is to go over part of this chart. Now, in a couple of recent videos, I have gone over this part right here, which I have titled The Jubilees Overlaid by the Pattern in the Mount in Exodus. And also, because there was a little confusion about how I calculate this, I also went through a second video showing how I calculate the transition from BC to AD, because clearly I'm using the Gregorian calendar, and just for years, not for dates, but for years I'm using the Gregorian calendar, and obviously there is no year zero. So my statement in that video was, as much as people want to question why I say what I say and or disagree with it, both of which are absolutely fine, my counts, my data points are all as perfect as I can get them. You don't have to agree with them. That is totally fine. But they are as technically perfect and precise as I can get them. Now, one of the questions that came up was regarding this piece of the puzzle, which has to do with calculating the beginning and ending of the first 69 weeks of years. I'll try to make this a little bigger. Okay, as we know from from Daniel 9:24, 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, and to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again and the wall even in troublous times. One of the premier ways in which people go wrong with this is that they immediately convert 69 periods of 7 to a number of years, and then expect to see that number of years between the two data points given. This leads people to start at a wrong place and end at a wrong place, and or start from wrong times of year and arrive at wrong ends of years. There is no command, I will repeat myself, there is no command ever to drill down into a year count and expect to see a number of years from point A to B based on the 69 periods of 7. When we take this over to the book of Revelation, we are told, for those of us who understand that Daniel's 70th week and Revelation correlate, there are 3 ways of measuring each half of the 70th week. And that is 1,260 days, 42 months, a time times it in half. This tells you that each half of the 70th week is measured in 30-day months times 12 months a year to equal 1,260 days and 42 months. So that means that the 70th week is not 7 years, it is 2,520 days. Since we know that the weeks of years are prophecy is pattern, and if it works that way for one of the weeks, it's going to work that way for all of the weeks, hence the Nisan 10 start date, then you need to apply that same logic that we find in Daniel and Revelation pertaining to the last week of years to the first 69 weeks of years. They all must be the same. If and since we know they are the same, then it is immeasurably wrong to convert 69 times 7 to 483 and say, oh, we need to see 483 years between our beginning and ending point on the Gregorian calendar. Well, sorry to tell you folks, but the Gregorian calendar doesn't use 360-day years. It uses 365.25-day years. So immediately, you know, if you are supposed to count by days, then you are not going to have an even number of years on the calendar that we use. And so trying to use as a starting point the calendar that we use is going to take you to the wrong place. What I have here is the way in which we were told to use this based on the last week of years that you extrapolate over to the first 69 weeks of years, which is a day count. If you know that half of the outstanding period of 7 is 1,260 days, then you know that the whole period of 7 is 2,520 days. And that is 84 months of 30-day months, which is 2,520 days. Again, that is not 7 years. So if you're saying it's going to run from January 1st in 2024 to January 1st in 2031, same day, 7 years apart on our calendar, you're going to be wrong because that's going to take you to too many days. The way in which Daniel told us to count is 30-day months times 12 months a year times a number of periods of 7. This is a 360-day year. Every single one of the weeks of years needs to then be applied or treated the same way. If one of them is treated that way, all of them need to be treated that way. So when we convert to a day count, not to a year count, to a day count, we say there's going to be 69 periods of 7 on a 360-day calendar. I need to see 173,880 days between the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah the Prince. That is not 483 years. So let me show you this, because people say 69 times 7 equals. So I need to see 483 years because it's a 490-year prophecy. No, it's not. Okay? No, it's not, folks. It is a 70 periods of 7 prophecy. That's what it is. So this is a big old no. Okay? But I'm going to show you how the math works, because 69 periods of 7 on a 360-day calendar equals that. I'm multiplying them all out. Okay? Oop. Maybe, sorry, I'm sitting in the dark here. All right, multiplying them all out. There, that's how we get the 173,880, okay? So then we're going to throw it back. We're going to divide by 365 because that's the number of years, you know, with fractions, 365 and a quarter. That's how long our days are. So how does that convert? Like Daniel used this type of calendar to measure his years, his weeks of years. But we don't use that. So how does that look when you put that number of days back into our calendar? Okay, well, let's divide. That day count divided by the number of days on our calendar, 476 years. That is why from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem, which is March 14, 445 BC to Nisan 10 of 32 AD which is April 6, 32 AD, is 476 years. And that's the way that it should be. And people who are looking for 483 years simply by doing 69 times 7 are setting themselves up for failure. We were never once told to convert this to a year count and then expect to see that number of years between beginning and ending. We were told to apply 3 types of measurement that equal the same things. A time times it in half, which is 3.5 years, which equals 42 months, which equals 1,260 days. And that is all of the information to tell us that these are not counted on a 365-day calendar. They are counted on a 360-day calendar with 12 equal 30-day months per year. So that is the biggest mistake that people make, is expecting to see 483 when you're only really truly ever going to see 476. And so the difference between 445 BC and 32 AD is 477, and then you have to take out year 0, so it's actually 476. Case in point, 445 BC down to year 0, which doesn't exist, up to 32, you're just going to do simple math, okay? It's 477, but year 0 doesn't exist, so we're going to subtract 1 year. $476. Between 445 BC and 32 AD is 476 years, which is what you would expect to see if you're doing it right. Now, one of the other things that comes into play is that people use the wrong starting point. It says, from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah the Prince. What do we know, hands down, about weeks of years? Even if we don't know about the years themselves, what do we know about 100% of weeks of years? That they are hinged off of a one-time benchmark event when Israel was commanded to enter her promised land. When ye shall come into the land that I shall give you, then the land shall declare a Sabbath unto the Lord. When did Israel come into their land? On the 10th day of the first month in Joshua 4:19. So since weeks of years begin on Nisan 10, the 10th day of the first month, you would expect to find data points in history and prophecy that all correlate to the month Nisan, if not Nisan 10, and in fact you do. Specifically in Nehemiah 2, you have the counterpart to, know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem, to restore and to build the city. Nehemiah 2:5. I said unto the king, if it please the king, and if thy servant have found favor in thy sight, that thou wouldst send me unto Judah, unto the city of my father's sepulchres, that I may build it. That is the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem, is Nehemiah 2:5. Word for word, it is in there. Now, the reference point given in Nehemiah 2 is that came to pass in the month Nisan, as we would expect, in the 20th year of Artaxerxes the king. And that is what I have up here. You can go to any historical record and it will tell you that Artaxerxes I Longimanus, who is that Artaxerxes from Nehemiah 2, began his reign on August 11th, 465 BC. The 20th year of his reign, and we understand that Persian regnal years are reckoned from fall to fall, not spring to spring. That's important to note because Nehemiah 1 also gives us a reference point that both Kislev, which would be December, and in Nehemiah 2, the month Nisan, are both in the 20th year of his reign. So his reign began in the fall to include December and March/April of the next year. It would be the next year in our calendar, but on that calendar that Daniel's measuring from, it was all in the 20th year of his reign. So we would understand that from fall of 446 to fall of 445, and in the spring of 445 is when the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem was, in the 20th year of the reign of Artaxerxes in the month Nisan. So it would be actually March 14th of 445 BC as your starting point, plus 476 years on our calendar, or what's more accurate is 173,880 days. That is an even 69 periods of 7 from here, which means if it starts in 445 on a certain day, which on the Hebrew calendar, which is Nisan 10, specifically in the month Nisan, it doesn't say Nisan 10, but since you know that about weeks of years, you can make that inference. So then it would also end on Nisan 10, that same period of time later. And that is what we find. This brings us over to the ministry of Christ. It would have ended his ministry on the unto the Messiah the Prince is Nisan 10 of 32 AD. You back that up 3.5 years to the beginning of his ministry, it's Tishri 10, the day that he assumed the role of the scapegoat to have Israel's sins laid upon him, and as a result, be the trump declaring Jubilee on the 10th day of the 7th month in the Day of Atonement, proclaiming forgiveness or liberty throughout all of the land. That's the reference from Leviticus 25:9. Now we can pinpoint that with even more precision beyond what we did with Artaxerxes, because we have the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius as the year that John the Baptist began his ministry. This we find in Luke 3 and Luke 3:23 about Jesus being about 30 years of age. Now that talks about something different. We won't get into that. But we can tell based on the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius would have been 28 AD. John the Baptist, being 6 months older than Jesus, would have begun paving the way for Christ in the spring, Jesus 6 months later in the fall to begin his ministry. So because the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius, according to Luke 3:1-3, was 28 AD, you know that the beginning of Jesus' ministry would have been in 28 AD. Some people say that Tiberius was co-regent with his father for 2 years, so he actually began his reign in 12 AD, which would then put the 15th year in 26 AD, plus 3.5 would be, 31? Which still doesn't work with what they try to make it work with, so it's not right anyway. But there is that line of thought out there that it should be from 12 AD to, or I guess that would put it in 30, but we're past the point where 30 could, I don't know what they say. I'm not even going to speculate. Strike that from the record. I usually get into trouble when I try to recall what other people say and why they say it and when it's wrong, and then I get myself all messed up. So strike that from the record. Simple statement, Tiberius began his reign in 14 AD. The 15th year is 28 AD, which is 3.5 years before he ended it on Nisan 10 of 32 AD at the triumphal entry. From the reign of Tiberius, reckoning the starting point of Jesus' ministry with respect to John the Baptist, and with the reign of Artaxerxes Longimanus with regard to the beginning of the first 69 weeks of years, obviously with the triumphal entry being the end of it, there should be no question where we end up. So I hope that this has helped. The one thing that I would encourage people not to do is diverge from the plain text. If it tells you to count by 69 periods of 7 and use a 360-day calendar, and it gives you a day count as a way to reckon that amount of time, don't convert it to years. Use the terms, the terminology, and the ways, the methods of counting that it gives you. Do not stray from that. Keep as literal to the text as possible. If you don't, that's typically where you're going to encounter an issue. So that is another part of what I have on here. I've now gone through this part up here and the transition from BC to AD and the reckoning of Artaxerxes and the beginning of ending of Jesus' ministry with respect to Tiberius. I am not going to go through this because it's not entirely pertinent, but I was specifically asked about reckoning the starting and ending of Jesus's, the starting and ending of the first 69 weeks of year with respect to a year count. Simple matter is, don't do it that way.